One December evening, the cry of fire echoed through Thomas Edison's plant. Spontaneous combustion had broken out in the film room, and within moments, all the packing compounds, film, and other flammable goods had gone up with a whoosh. When the family couldn't find Edison, they became concerned. Was he safe? With all his assets going up in smoke, would his spirit be broken? He was 67, no age to begin anew. Then they saw Thomas Edison in the plant yard running toward the family. "Where's Mom?" he shouted. "Go get her! Tell her to get her friends! They'll never see a fire like this again!" At 5:30 the next morning, when the fire was barely under control, Thomas Edison called his employees together and announced, "We're rebuilding." One man was told to lease all the machine shops in the area, another to obtain a wrecking crane from the Erie Railroad Company. Then, almost as an afterthought, Thomas Edison added, "Oh, by the way, anybody know where we can get some money?" Later on, Thomas Edison explained, "You can always make capital out of disaster. We've just cleared out a bunch of old rubbish. We'll build bigger and better on these ruins." That story is an excerpt from my bestseller, Holy Shift, using principles of comedy to quickly reach people far from God. I'm Jonathan Herron, host of the Fearless Podcast. This is episode 49, and today we're talking about pushing past your doubts, discouragements, and deadly setbacks. So sit back, grab some strong coffee, get ready to take notes. Episode 49 of the Fearless Podcast begins now.
I'm Jonathan Herron, a guy from Iowa who married his high school sweetheart and adopted 5 amazing kiddos. 7 years ago, I started a new modern church from scratch that is now the 11th fastest growing church in America. I also wrote a best-selling book on using principles of comedy and leadership, and along the way, I've discovered a passion for helping ordinary people jumpstart their lives and fearlessly chase their dreams and purposes in life. So each week, I'll be sharing insanely practical advice and inspiring interviews to help you jumpstart your life and become fearless. These are the tools to change your life. This is the Fearless Podcast.
Welcome again, friends, Fearless Nation. Jonathan Herron coming to you from my office at the church that I love, Life Church, Michigan, located here in the High Five state of Michigan. In the past 11 months, small business owners, leaders, teachers, parents, everyone has seen their rhythms, routines, and lives disrupted by the global pandemic. I remember March 2020. At that time, our 7-year-old church startup that had started from scratch, it means we started with no money, no people, no facility, and no clue. Our church startup that had grown to become the fastest growing church in Michigan, the 11th fastest growing church in America. We were riding a wave of momentum. And at the end of February, beginning of March 2020, I was flying around quite a bit. I started a week in Southern California, spending time with one of my mentors, Bob Goff, New York Times bestselling author, great guy. And then I was invited to a private briefing for faith leaders by the State Department at the White House. Really, no joke, I know. I am not the smartest kid in the classroom. I feel like Forrest Gump. I just kind of stumble into these big moments. And so I was getting a private tour of the White House residence. We received this private briefing for faith leaders. flew back here to Michigan to oversee a massive outreach in Midland, Michigan. Our Midland campus did a huge outreach, a Comic-Con of all things, because we are willing to do whatever it takes to build bridges of trust with people who would normally not darken a church door. And we reached over 1,000 people. We were excited, gearing up for a big Sunday, and then 3 days later, it was like Thanos snapped his fingers. Everything shut down because of COVID. And immediately, for us in church world, we had to move everything to digital. I remember saying to our staff that very day that this is not going to be a 2-week shutdown. In fact, if you go back in the Fearless Podcast episodes, way back in April of 2020, I predicted that mass gatherings like concerts, sporting events, church services, would not see any return to their pre-COVID numbers until at the earliest fall 2021. And listen, I'm not a prophet. I'm not the son of a prophet, and I work for a nonprofit organization. But that prediction has borne out to be true as we're in the 11th month of this disruption that has permanently altered how we do business, how we do family life, how we do church. And so I know that many of the listeners in podcast land and those of you watching on our Fearless Leadership YouTube channel have been going through seasons of personal doubts, discouragements, and pressing through deadly setbacks. So today I want to share a little bit of the journey I have been on as a leader. They don't train you for this. I think we are all receiving a master's degree in crisis management. And I want to give you some encouragement, some tips. I want you to see there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You're not alone. Every teacher, every small business owner, every church leader is dealing with their own doubts, discouragements, and deadly setbacks. 50% of church leaders right now are looking for a new job outside of ministry because the role of being a pastor has now jumped to being one of the top 3 deadliest professions that leads to suicide. So this is important when we talk about pushing past your doubts, your discouragements, your deadly setbacks. And listen, when it comes to setbacks in any organization, here's the real deal. You can start taking notes. You have to realize that setbacks will come. You may have dreams, you may have plans for the future, but setbacks will come. They're like NASCAR races. There will be wipeouts. How you react is all you have control over. So let's dig into pushing past your doubts, your discouragements, and your deadly setbacks. Today's episode brought to you by my bestseller, Holy Shift, using principles of comedy in your business, in your church, in your organization to see it grow. Setbacks happen, and I think Jay-Z said it best. The wise words of the scribe Jay-Z, he said, "The genius thing we did is we didn't give up." Just like Thomas Edison, you need to see when the rubble clears, you are at the precipice of opportunity. There's been no better time for entrepreneurs to be alive than in 2021. You and I are invited to retool, revamp, relaunch into the new world. It's like Planet Earth gave everybody a hall pass. The Etch-a-Sketch has been shaken clear, and you get a clean slate to dream again. I dare you to dream again, but anticipate that setbacks are just part of the journey. Nobody could have foreseen COVID, but you need to anticipate that setbacks are going to come. Some setbacks are out of your hands. Some setbacks are self-inflicted wounds. And some setbacks are just bad friends. So setbacks are going to come. We are all faced with a series of great opportunities brilliantly disguised as impossible situations. So I remember a time that some men came into my home. They tore up the walls. They blew a huge hole in the ceiling, created a tremendous disaster in my house. But here's the thing. I was not traumatized by their destruction because I had seen the plan. This wasn't a destruction, it was a planned demolition. Sometimes in life, things need to be torn down in order to build something better. And because I had seen the master plans, I could trust the master builder. So listen up, leaders. If you want to fearlessly lead your organization to healthy growth in this new reality, you need to fearlessly trust the master builder. God knows what he is doing in your life. Sometimes God will tear something down to build something better. So in Genesis chapter 6, mankind is united building a tower to reach the heavens, the Tower of Babel. And it says in Genesis 6 that God smashed it to the ground. Could you imagine being one of those guys? You've put sweat, tears, financial equity, emotional equity into this plan for your life, this tremendous blueprint, only to have it demolished by God? See, that's what's happened to many of us in the past 11 months. But God smashed down the tower that was building a kingdom of man so that he could build something better, the kingdom of God through Abraham in Genesis 12. So you need to trust God is operating behind the scenes in your life. Your mess will eventually become his message. Your test will eventually become your testimony. If God brought you to it, he will bring you through it. And that alone should give you the fearless courage to push past your doubts, your discouragements, and your deadly setbacks. You don't need to be paralyzed or traumatized by what's happened. So for us, I work at a nonprofit. It's a charity. It's a 501c3. We had to shut our physical doors and figure out how to do live streaming. And then, because it's a visual medium, you are now communicating timeless truths in timely ways on Sundays. And eventually we started to see that the giving dropped, which is normal. In a pandemic, if people are losing their jobs, if there's fear and uncertainty in the economy, of course, the last thing that the average citizen is going to do is write a check to a charity. So every church in America got hit in the pocketbook, and paying staff, paying the light bills, paying your mortgage suddenly becomes a significant challenge for churches and charities. That's why in 2021 you're seeing an acceleration of the closure of sick and dying churches. They're closing their doors permanently because of lack of revenue. You're also seeing the American shopping mall. Its death spiral is accelerating. So we got into the summertime, and for 4 or 5 months had been telling the staff, hey, you need to work on a side hustle. You need to figure something out, a part-time gig, because the well is going to dry up. And this pandemic's not going anywhere. And who are we to ask people to give to the church when they're just trying to put bread on the table? So we warned people, we gave them advance notice, and when we had to finally furlough, which is a horrible, horrible experience, I remember that staff meeting. It was very tense. It was tough. The hardest part of leadership sometimes is having those hard conversations. And I remember walking away from that first meeting and saying, okay, let's meet again. Let's talk more about this. Let's answer all the questions, relook at the data. Our board of directors said, no, we got to do this. We got to furlough. It's temporary. We want our staff here. We just can't, in good conscience, ask them to work 40 hours a week and at the end of the month not be able to pay them. That would be really crappy, don't you think? So July 1st, the plan was to furlough. I went back to the board of directors and tried to jump on the sword for my staff because I love my team. And I said, hey, listen, what if you guys furlough me? Like, I will work for free for the next several months. And instead of paying me, pay the staff. And I remember one of the guys on the board at the time, his name was Dan, and he immediately said, no, that's a non-starter. So, delivered the news to the staff. We love you guys. This is a temporary situation and season, and we did our best to set them up for success. That was discouraging for the staff. It was discouraging for me. It made me doubt myself as a leader. As many of you, small business owners, restaurant owners, teachers, you feel like a failure because you can't deliver due to a situation outside of your control, the pandemic. And it turned into a deadly setback because unbeknownst to myself and to our board of directors, there were sin issues among two of the paid staff members that were eventually brought to our attention. Moral issues, like biblically disqualifying moral issues. So in the scriptures, you look at 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1 to get the standard for being a pastor or for being a church staff member, and it's basically being a person of integrity, above reproach. The two ways that Satan attacks is to either lead a pastor into sexual immorality or into financial mismanagement. And our board, and we discovered that a pastor had fallen into sexual immorality and that another staff member was improperly using church funds for his own benefit. And so when we went to talk to them in a loving, gracious way, they were in a negative place with the furlough, with the situation, with negative voices in their lives, and they abruptly quit. And what we saw was people emotionally vomiting on social media. Instead of pausing and reflecting with emotional maturity, they were saying, look at me, I'm a sob story, and they were trashing our board of directors. They were trashing this church that my wife and I have given everything to raise up. They were taking shots at me personally, and then they were blocking all of us on social media so we couldn't respond. We tried to meet with them individually. They would not meet. It just became like the stuff hitting the fan. It was a deadly setback. Imagine you're already dealing with the closure of your physical location due to the pandemic, and now you've got staff members who are saying false things, who are in active sin, and who start grabbing other staff, grabbing key volunteers, grabbing donors. It was wild. It was wild. It hurt on a relational level because it affected me and my wife and my children. These were people that were in our lives, in our living rooms, people that we sacrificed for. It caused confusion in our church body because we couldn't meet on Sundays. It was very hard to communicate. And I think statistically, fake news travels on social media 6 times faster than true reality. People love the salacious. They love gossip over gospel. And so very quickly, it became a situation where the entire staff resigned, took all the key volunteers and leaders, and a lot of key donors, and caused a church split, starting a church in the same community, following the exact same strategy and ministry model that we have championed here at Life Church. And so it just hurt on a professional level. We always have staff and interns sign non-compete agreements. And here are these men and women who know better, who are not living with honor and integrity, who've been biblically disqualified. It was just a crushing experience. And for us, it could have been a deadly setback that could have shut down this movement of God. It could have all just gone up in fireworks, because suddenly I discovered I was the only paid staff person. And all the arrows were being shot at me and at our board of directors. And we had to navigate how do you love people, show grace to people, yet walk with integrity, honor? How do you push past your own doubts, your own discouragements, and navigate deadly setbacks? So all that to say, this is very, very personal. This is very real in our own lives. Now, I'm 6 months past that. Thankful for a fantastic licensed counselor, a strong wife, an amazing godly board of directors. You quickly discover who your friends are. Who are the people walking in grace and truth, and who are the people walking in gossip and darkness? And I refer to them as our prodigal staff, because I'm not angry. I don't hold a grudge. I only hold out a hand. They don't know what they're doing. They don't realize the consequences they're unleashing in their lives because of the sins they're committing and continue to commit to this day. And so I'm praying that they come to their senses, just like the prodigal son in Luke 15, who basically said to his dad, "Give me my inheritance. I want everything from you, but I don't want you. I want you dead." And the father didn't argue, didn't defend his reputation. He let his son walk away, and the son brought great dishonor on his family name. But it says in Luke 15, in the words of Jesus, that one day he came to his senses and returned in order to repent. And that's my prayer. That's my wife's prayer. That's our board's prayer. We have no interest in throwing rocks. We'd rather throw grace. And just like the father, he was always watching the horizon for his son to return. And when he saw his son in the distance, he ran toward his son and embraced his son and threw a party and said, "Welcome home. You are loved. You are welcomed." It's not my job to judge or point fingers or to condemn. My role as a leader is to love, to own what I've done wrong, and then to make space for grace. Leaders don't build walls. Leaders extend the table so that more people can be included. And that may be where you're at. Listen, every great player in the Super Bowl plays hurt. What you're experiencing is not unique in human history. So get over yourself and start moving forward. Let me give you some thoughts and some tips on that. Anyone can steal ideas from you, but no one can steal your execution and your passion. So whatever obstacle has been thrown your way, your choice to execute with passion is your secret sauce. Don't allow setbacks in your story to become campsites. We've all been blown away by the last 11 months. It's a setback. It's okay to acknowledge that we're hurt, we're wounded. But don't camp there. It's time to pack up the tent, move forward, and start pioneering into new areas. Remove the rubble and build a new platform. Start thinking and dreaming about what could be, what should be, and make it better. Flip your setback for good. See it as this great opportunity, brilliantly disguised as an impossible situation. Flip your setback for good. That's advice from my friend Bob Goff. So in the scriptures, in the Old Testament, God's people end up in exile. Everything's turned upside down. Hello, COVID. And this guy named Ezra, in Ezra chapter 7, he leads one of 3 waves that return to the rubble of Jerusalem to rebuild their lives. Ezra 7, verse 10. I love this verse. For Ezra had set his heart to study the law of the Lord and to do it and to teach the statutes and rules in Israel. You need to be like Ezra, a fearless leader who has set your heart. That means determined commitment, no matter what is thrown in your face. You got to be like that song from the 90s, I get knocked down, but I get up again. Ain't nothing going to keep me down. I get knocked down. Come on, you need to be an Ezra 7:10 fearless leader that have a determined commitment. Set your heart to study it, to do it, to pass it on, just like Ezra. There's another principle at play in Proverbs 4, verse 23 about the heart. Ezra set his heart, it says in Proverbs 4:23, to guard your heart, for it determines the course of your life. So when you experience doubts, discouragements, setbacks, ask yourself, who has a microphone to my heart? What voices am I allowing to influence me? Show me your 5 friends, and I'll show you who you are in 5 years. What books are you reading? What podcasts are you listening to? Who's your coach? Don't have a coach? Hit me up at jonathanheron.com. Join our coaching cohort. We'll get you going. You need to see who has the microphone. You want voices of hope, voices of truth, voices of reality, passion, and purpose to have the microphone. And you may have to click mute, and you may have to take a season away from other voices. You got to guard your heart, and with determined commitment, set your heart to study it, to do it, to pass it on. Flip your setback for good. God gives the vision. We determine the speed. That picture of the future for your business, or for rebuilding your classroom, or for restoring a broken relationship, or for relaunching your church. God gives the vision. We determine the speed. We need a generation of fearless leaders who rise up, a generation of honor and integrity that becomes the change that we wish to see. And I get it. You are carrying around something that burned down in your life. You got to realize that thing that burned down, it happened a long time ago. It's time to start rebuilding. You got to guard your heart, set your heart, never respond to shade that comes from trees that don't bear good fruit. Who has a microphone in your life? What are you bringing in so that you can operate fearlessly out of the overflow? I believe that your setback is really a setup for your comeback. 3 years ago, a guy named Sean was serving a 5.5-year prison sentence for drugs. 2 days ago, he stood before Life Church and went public with his faith through baptism. It is never too late to become who you might have been. You can't change the past, but you can build the future. In fact, you need to let go of what happened. If you want to get rid of the doubts and discouragements and deadly setbacks, you have to let your past die, or it won't let you live. Maybe you need to see a good counselor. Maybe you need a good coach. Hit us up at jonathanheron.com. But every setback is a setup for a comeback. Don't let the end of your story be that it all burned down. So there I was. My doors were shut because of COVID. Can't be with my people physically. Rumors and lies are spreading online. All of my friends have betrayed me. And there was a significant healing process that I had to walk through, that I had to walk our church through and shepherd them through. And you discover who your true friends are. I just got this text message from a close friend of mine who used to be in ministry. He was asking how I was doing, and there's good days and then there's tough days, right? And so I just shared, man, I just saw some negative stuff online and it just kind of brought my heart down. And he wrote, my friend, I'm so sorry. And he said, for what it's worth, one of the benefits from stepping away from church world has been an eye-opening to the pettiness and drama-inducing nature of so many in the church. The sin pattern that so many recklessly run into is okayed, while the blatant offenses, like mine, he says, are highlighted and focused on, as they should be, but we ignore the others. And so he gave me his great advice. He said, protect yourself, protect your heart, protect your family, run away from the cynical nature that I know would want to rear its head if I'm in your shoes. Focus on what you do. You're good at what you do. The others can't steal your passion and attention. I believe in you, my friend. Who has a microphone in your life? Because that is a mighty megaphone for good right there. Instead of asking, what did I do wrong over and over, which leads to depression, instead, ask yourself, what does God want to do now? And that leads to excitement and passion and fearlessly rising up. Sure, people have said mean things. That's fine. Get an eraser. Write some new truths in your story. That's what Jesus was always doing. He would walk up to someone and say, you're no longer Simon, you're Peter. You have a new name. You have a new identity. You have a new destiny. And this impossible situation is a brilliant disguise for your comeback, for your relaunch, for your new destiny. So stop putting quarters in the fear machine. Instead, dare to dream again. When I was a kid, me and my friends would take paper and we would attempt to build the perfect paper airplane. We wanted to make a paper airplane that looked nice, that looked really awesome, that would throw really far, and we would spend all this time trying to perfect this airplane, and then when we would toss it, it would go 2 feet. You know what I learned? A crumpled up paper ball throws further. It doesn't look awesome. It kind of looks crummy because it's all crumpled up, but it will throw further. Instead of sitting there paralyzed or choosing to be traumatized, instead push past your doubts, your discouragements, and your deadly setbacks. Leave the door open to love others when they least expect it, least deserve it, and see what God can do through you. Listen, if today's episode has been encouraging to you, would you do me a favor? Would you leave a 5-star review over on Apple or Spotify or Stitcher, wherever you listen to this podcast? Your 5-star positive review actually helps us engage with more eyeballs. It changes the algorithms, so help us connect with more people. You can also go and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Fearless Leadership. Just click subscribe at Fearless Leadership on YouTube. Click the little bell so you get all the updates. I would love to connect with you at jonathanheron.com. Tons of free resources for you and your team, as well as on social media at High Five John, at High Five JON. And if you'd like a front row, real-time seat to the relaunch of our journey, Life Church, you can follow along at lifechurchmichigan.com. I believe that our best days are ahead of us. I refuse to do leadership and ministry out of memory. Instead, I want to have the same passion, the same ethos as Jeff Bezos, who just is now retiring from Amazon. Amazon was a little startup that you may have heard of, blew up, and one of the cardinal rules for Amazon employees is that they truly believe to the core of their being that today is their first day of business, that they are the scrappy underdogs, that they have to hustle, they have to move forward and press through doubts, discouragements, and deadly setbacks. Hey, this has been fun. Make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast and on YouTube. Next week, episode 50. That's right, the Fearless Podcast, 50 episodes. We are going to officially be over the hill with tons more encouragement and strategic tips to help you move forward fearlessly in your life, in your business, in your church. I'm Jonathan Hare, and it's been a pleasure cheering for you. And remember to enjoy your burrito.
Hey gang, this is Jonathan Heron here, encouraging you to fearlessly lead your church toward growth. Listen, when a leader gets better, everyone gets better, and my heartbeat is to just share with movement leaders like yourself, church planters, the stuff that we've learned here at Life Church Michigan. And if this is super helpful to you, you can discover even more practical tips online at fearlessleaders.net, the #1 source for free articles, video training for church leaders, volunteers, church planters. Listen, our friends at Outreach Magazine just came out with their biggest issue of the year, tracking the 100 fastest growing churches in America. And would you believe it? By God's grace, we're on the list. We came in at number 11 because our heartbeat is to quickly reach more people far from God. And we want to help you. When a leader gets better, the church gets better. And when your church gets better, heaven gets more crowded. Head on over to fearlessleaders.net for tons of free resources.